Hi everyone, my name is Matt Goodison. I'm a musician and I'm here in my studio, which as you can see, I like plants and I like things with wires and flashing lights. So I'm just here to talk to you all about getting your work out there. Okay, so thinking about this idea of getting your work out there, it's quite a tricky question to answer. Like, how do you get your work out there? So my first point was in relation to how you feel about your work. Now, I often feel very sick when I'm releasing my work into the public world. And I thought long and hard about that. You know, what is that sickness? And over the years, you know, I've released quite a lot of things. I've released albums, and you know, I've had a chapter published in an academic book, and I've always had the same feeling. And it's the kind of feeling of almost showing your homework. I feel kind of sick. But what is counterintuitive about that is that the harder I've worked on the thing, the more sick I feel. So over the years, I think I've learned to embrace that feeling of sickness as a way of me knowing that I've put my heart and soul into that piece of work. And to put your everything into something leaves you feeling vulnerable. But one of the great kind of paradoxes about creativity and artwork and innovation is that unless you've put your heart and soul into it, no one's going to react to it. So you have to be embracing risk, and you have to be pushing your discipline forwards, whether that's business or app design, or whether it's ceramics or sculpture or music or writing, whatever it is, you have to be on the forefront of innovation and change. And to do that means going out on a limb. So my first piece of advice for getting your work out there is feel comfortable with that sickness, with that feeling of emotional vulnerability. And I've got a quote from Brene Brown, who I'm sure you know, because she is a leading lecturer and researcher on vulnerability. And she says this: if you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your opinion. So, or she says, in your feedback. Point number 2 relates to one of my favourite musicians of all time, Bob Dylan. And my piece, my quote for this is, remember the Bob Dylan rule. It's not a record, it's a movement. Why I think this is so significant is when we are operating inside of our worlds, inside of our domains, we get very caught up in the actual details of the genre or the world we're in. So in music, that could be chords, it could be lyrical flow, but the way people relate to things outside of that is it has to connect on a much bigger and deeper level than the kind of mechanics of the discipline. And what enabled Bob Dylan to become, you know, absolutely hands down the greatest songwriter of the 20th century was that he was able very early on to make his music stand for a great cultural movement. So, point number 3. Now, I suppose this is maybe more direct to actually placing the work out there. The other 2 have been more philosophical. And this is about marketing. So, I don't know if you can see that here. That's a picture, because I read a lot of books on this thing, of a book by Seth Godin called This Is Marketing. Now, if you want to learn how to actually get your product out there, then you need to read this book. Now, why do you need to read This Is Marketing? Because This Is Marketing by Seth Godin is not a book about mechanics. It's not a book about little marketing tricks. It's a book about learning to listen to the market. Now, why is this crucial? So yesterday I saw a tweet by a musician, and the tweet said, "My new record is out, listen to it now, subscribe to me on Twitter, subscribe to me on Spotify playlists." That tweet had no likes and it had no retweets. Now, why is that? It's a really interesting question. He's obviously worked really hard on his record, and the artist is very proud of it. But that is the same as walking into a bar, a wine bar or a kind of public space, and saying, "Hey everyone, I've made a record. You should all listen to it. It's great. See you later." Now, no one would ever start a conversation like that. You'd start by listening and you'd start by engaging. So that leads directly onto my fourth point, which is become an active member of the community of the world that your art or your product or your game or your music or whatever it is you're creating, be part of the community of makers. Find what Brian Eno would call a scenius. Now, this is a great word because a scenius is collaborative creativity. It's a culture that favours innovation. So you can read about it bizarrely in Austin Kleon's great book, Show Your Work, which I also really recommend. It isn't in Brian Eno's book, A Year with Swollen Appendices. But you can read all about Scenius online, and it's a fascinating concept. Here I can show you, this is me engaging with my musical community. So I made this crazy diagram when I'd hit a real kind of pit in my soul, in my artistic practice, again what Brian Eno would call the abyss. It was the point of despair. I was very fortunate that someone told me to go to Able to Loop conference in Berlin, and I made this incredible diagram of all the things that inspired me and people to connect with. Let's summarise. So, point number one, if you don't feel sick when you're putting your thing out there into the world, then, well, I said that the wrong way around, then you haven't tried hard enough. So, yeah, that sounds a bit accusatory. Rephrased, it's okay to feel sick when you're putting your thing out there. Point number two, remember the Bob Dylan rule, it's not a record, it's a movement. Point number three, read This Is Marketing by Seth Godin. It's a book about learning to hear, and Seth Godin in this book, which I utterly love, he says, don't make a key and wander around trying to find a lock. Find the lock that you're trying to unlock and fashion the key. Now, I think that really summarises the way the modern creative industries work. And point number four, be an active member of your community. Engage, share, don't shout. Thank you very much. I've been Matt Goodison. It's been really great talking to you, and I hope to see you all soon.